In this video, I build and paint Tamiya's Kettenkraftrad. My plan for this build is to set it somewhere in the North African desert. I was inspired by this real-life cactus that might even make its way into the diorama. If you were at all on the fence about buying this kit, I would highly recommend it. The detail is amazing, the build is extremely fun, comes with even some photo etch parts, and the figures that are included are top notch. I don't think I'm going to be using them in the diorama, but I built them all the same just to see how they looked. The most time-consuming part of the build was the wheels and tracks. The wheels look great, and the individual tracks are easy to put on. However, they come in two pieces, so once you put the individual links on, you need to also put on the rubber pads. After that, all the sub-assemblies were done. It was time to paint. Since my inspiration is the desert, I want my paint to look really distressed. Since eventually the vehicle will be covered in dust, I wanted to make sure that the worn paint had a high contrast. This way, the effect won't get lost. I start with a rusty base coat so I can use chipping fluid for the first worn paint effect. I'll then lightly spray the base coat over that, gradually in thin layers. My reference photos showed a light gray camo that is hard to pick up on camera, but I think it adds a little bit to the final effect. I did this on all of the sub-assemblies and then added the decals. This you have to do very carefully because I wanted to make sure I chipped on and around the decals, but using as little water as possible, knowing that that would start the chipping process. Once those were on, I did start the chipping process. I just used a wet toothpick to gradually tease the surface of that paint, breaking it up in patterns that I wanted. I used some tweezers to pull away the excess paint. This way I could get some nice controlled patches of broken up paint. This paint then glides over that chipping fluid layer, and I can push those to places that I want. I can crack the paint in ways that I want, and I can remove the paint that is not necessary. But it gives you a lot of control and a pretty good working time. When you're done, you just seal it all up, and it is locked in place. It does get a little spongy though, so you have to really be careful, but sometimes the paint will overlap itself and that will change the color of the paint, giving you another layered weather effect. Here I'm just using various sizes of needles and toothpicks to make smaller indentations in the paint. Again, I didn't want to use a brush and have that control kind of go away. I wanted these chips in very specific areas, and I wanted them to look a very specific way. So I used this over all the surfaces that I knew would be in contact with things, wearing them away, and then just some basic wear and tear. Here I attempted to use a brush to make the painting of the tire easier, but I seemed to lose a lot of the detail there. So eventually I just ended up painting those tires, but I wanted to show you how that worked. Here I just wanted to give some detail to the seat, even though most of this is not seen. But the seat itself looked like it was a hard plastic, or it was probably like a hard worn leather. So I gave it kind of a shiny look that it made it look a little bit more worn and used. There again, that sun would be bleaching the color, and the wear and tear on the seat would be wearing that surface away. That after I sealed everything up, I wanted to paint some license plates on here. I probably should have used some styrene instead. And you can see I actually lost a bit of the paint as it chipped up, but it ended up looking okay, but a little bit less control than I would have liked. But these were not included with the kit, so I had to scratch build or scratch paint that. This is the next layer. I used the base coat again and came back in with a sponge and kind of re-emphasized the look of that paint. And then I used lighter and lighter shades to give that more of a chipped look. Now I'm just adding some streaking from the rust with some basic washes, and then went back through and did a pin wash of some very thin, very dark brown. And that's just to emphasize this. I will move some of that away. I don't want to soak everything because that will affect the overall color, and I want this to be a little brighter because, again, the sun would be bleaching out that color. Coming back in with another lighter tone with the sponge, just kind of re-emphasizing the chips. And then a little bit more with the brush to keep that control. The sponge is great, but the control is better. This is some oil paint. I just used some buff, and I'm just blending that in to the paint that's there. Again, I think the worst thing you can do to a model is make it extremely dark. So you always want to highlight if you can. I was originally going to paint these seats khaki, but then I thought they would look better matching the driver's seat. So I did the same effect, kind of where the occupants would be sitting the most, tried to lighten that up like it was worn out. And at the top of the cushion, I tried to lighten that as well. But then that was it. Kind of a shorter video this week. I've been extremely busy, but I wanted to get this out to you guys so you could see the progress, and hopefully we'll have a diorama soon. See ya.